A 12-year-old boy, Tyrese Porter, entered a bank to deposit his birthday money. What should have been a proud moment became embarrassing until his mother arrived and altered the situation without raising her voice. Tyrese Porter wasn't typically a nervous child. He was quick with a joke, fast on the court, and intelligent enough to keep up with children 2 grades older. This morning, a clammy feeling gripped his hands, and his breath came in short bursts as he gazed up at the large glass doors of Crestmark Bank on Fremont Avenue in Tempe, Arizona. He had just celebrated his 12th birthday, and this marked his first independent deposit. The envelope within his hoodie pocket contained precisely $220. It was birthday money, a mix of fives, tens, and a couple of 20s. Nothing extravagant. For him, this was the culmination of months of effort, supported by Aunt Claudine, Uncle Leo, and his older cousin Ronald, who worked evening shifts at the auto shop. His mother, Dr. Alicia Monroe, had brought him to this location but remained in the car, offering him a final piece of encouragement through the open window. "You got this, baby. Walk in there confidently, as if you belong. Because you do." He nodded, attempting to conceal the tremor in his legs. The sun shone brightly from mid-morning. The sneakers, still dusty from a pickup game the previous night, made a slight squeak on the floor as he entered. The bank was peaceful, not deserted, but peaceful in a relaxed Saturday atmosphere. A man wearing a button-down shirt was at the kiosk, looking at his phone. An older couple occupied the waiting chairs, quietly discussing some paperwork. Only one woman was in line at the counter, signing a document, with her toddler chewing on a deposit slip nearby. Tyrese positioned himself behind her and attempted to regulate his breathing. He glanced down at the envelope, verifying his handwriting on the exterior. "T. Porter, Savings." He had rehearsed his signature 3 times the previous night, not because he was required to, but because it seemed like the appropriate action. He observed the digital cue board advance to the subsequent number. The woman and her toddler departed. The bank teller did not even lift her head as she announced, "Next." Tyrese moved forward. "Hello," he said, polite and firm, just as his mother had instructed. "I'm here to deposit into my savings." The teller's eyes lifted slowly. Her name tag indicated she was Margaret Delaney. She appeared to be in her late 50s, with silver-streaked brown hair and a largely unchanging, tight-lipped expression. She offered no smile, no greeting in return. Instead, her gaze immediately fell upon the envelope he held. "And where did you obtain that sum of money?" Tyrese blinked, uncertain if he had understood her question correctly. "It's my birthday money," he stated, raising the envelope slightly. "My aunt and my cousin had given it to me. I simply wanted to deposit it." "Uh-huh," she responded, interrupting him. She bent forward across the counter, examining the bills as if they were questionable. "Do you possess a state-issued ID?" Tyrese paused. "No, Mom, just my school ID and my account number. My mom opened it with me last summer." Margaret released a slow breath through her nose. With the tone adults use when they've had enough of dealing with someone, she shifted her gaze toward a nearby colleague, then returned her attention to Tyrese. "I'm going to need to verify all of this," she stated. "You could be anyone, and this could be anything." Tyrese's chest tightened. He looked down at the envelope again, as if it might have somehow changed since he walked in. But it was still just an envelope, still his name, still the money he'd been given, fair and square. "I can give you the account number," he said. His voice remained calm, but it softened. Margaret did not respond. Instead, she turned to pick up the phone near her station. "I'm calling the manager to assist. Please wait." The man at the kiosk had now turned to observe. The older couple whispered something, their eyes moving toward the boy at the counter. Tyrese felt his face flush, and he tried to avoid looking up. He reached into his backpack for the small blue bank booklet his mom had given him. It didn't seem promising, but Margaret no longer focused on him. She was engaged in a phone conversation, occasionally looking his way with a tense expression. Tyrese felt a knot in his throat. This wasn't the plan. However, the moment she ended the call, things began to deteriorate quicker than he could manage. Margaret placed the phone down with a gentle click and directed a sharp look at Tyrese, as if assessing him for a situation he hadn't agreed to. "Someone will be with you in a minute," she stated briefly. She then focused on her computer screen, her fingers tapping as if he'd disappeared from her view entirely. Tyrese stood there, uncertain whether to speak or simply wait. He looked down at the envelope again. It wasn't trembling, but his hands felt rigid now, as if they didn't quite belong to him. The lobby felt colder, not in temperature, but in feeling. It was as if the atmosphere changed when she asked that first question. The man from the kiosk was still observing. One of the tellers was situated a few windows down. There was no verbal communication, but their eyes consistently averted, quickly glancing away each time Tyrese made eye contact. A tall man wearing a dark gray tie emerged from a hallway located behind the counter. His name tag identified him as Kenneth Flores, branch manager. He moved towards Tyrese deliberately, maintaining a polite demeanor but with a reserved customer service expression that concealed his thoughts. "Hi there," Kenneth stated. "Are you attempting to make a deposit?" Tyrese affirmed with a nod. "Yes, sir, into my savings account." He says it's birthday money. Margaret spoke from her desk without looking up. Kenneth briefly glanced at her, then returned his attention to Tyrese. "Do you have an account number on you?" Tyrese provided the small blue booklet and the slip with his account info. Kenneth took them and began typing into a tablet. "I don't have a state ID," Tyrese added, his voice quieter now. "Just school, I'm 12. Kenneth paused for half a second. 12? And you came in by yourself?" Kenneth nodded once. "Yes, sir," his mom said. "Okay, can I take a look at the money?" Tyrese offered the envelope. Kenneth opened it with care, as if handling explosives, and began counting the bills directly at the counter. Meanwhile, Margaret commented, "I just thought we should be cautious. You never know these days." Her words felt like a sharp rebuke. Tyrese stopped moving. He wasn't sure if a response was expected. He felt uneasy, but remained still. The issue wasn't precisely her words, but the manner in which she delivered them. It felt as though he was being assessed as a risk, a potential danger, an issue requiring control. Kenneth remained silent, completing his count before turning to Tyrese. 220, correct?" Tyrese confirmed with a nod. "Okay, I need a moment. I'll verify the account." As Kenneth moved away, Tyrese stood still, the envelope no longer in his grasp. A constriction formed in his throat. He resisted the urge to cry, unwilling to do so in the presence of unfamiliar people. He attempted to recall what his mom always said: "You're not the problem, baby. You're the reason someone else gets to grow today." However, at that moment, it didn't feel like anyone was learning anything. A woman a few spots behind in line appeared as though she might speak. She opened her mouth, then simply looked at her phone instead. When Kenneth returned, he handed Tyrese the slip confirming the account and deposit total. "You're all set," he said. "It's gone through," Tyrese whispered, thanking him. As he turned to leave, Margaret quietly added, "Better safe than sorry." The comment wasn't loud, but it was audible. Tyrese halted his departure. His ears burned once more. He desired to leave, yet also felt compelled to say something, anything at all. Instead, he simply reversed direction toward the exit, suppressing the words he couldn't voice. However, beyond those doors, a pair of eyes had been observing, and they weren't about to remain silent any longer. The glass door opened slowly, and a woman entered, her presence immediately altering the atmosphere. Dr. Alicia Monroe commanded attention without speaking. Her blazer was a crisp slate blue with subtle pinstripes, and her heels clicked across the polished floor with purpose. Alicia carried herself with an air of assuredness. Heads turned, some driven by curiosity, others by a natural response. She wasn't seeking attention. However, she was here for her son. The moment she entered, Tyrese noticed her. His shoulders tightened, not with fear, but with something akin to relief. It was like finding the handle on a locked door. Margaret looked up. Her expression tightened briefly, as if anticipating this moment. Alicia didn't immediately go to the counter. Instead, she walked directly to her son, placed a gentle hand on his back, and spoke to him, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "You okay?" Tyrese nodded, though not convincingly. She refrained from pushing the matter. Instead, she shifted her attention to the counter, making eye contact with Margaret, then Kenneth, who had returned, perceiving a change in the atmosphere. "Good morning," Alicia stated, her voice steady and composed. "I'm Dr. Alicia Monroe. Tyrese is my son." Kenneth adjusted his throat and offered a brief, polite smile. "Yes, ma'am, everything is handled. His deposit has been processed." "That isn't what I'm here to discuss," she responded. Her voice remained level. There was no need to raise it. Each word broke the silence. "I observed my son enter here independently today, displaying pride and readiness to accomplish something adults frequently advise children to do, to be responsible. Rather than receiving guidance, he experienced questioning, doubt, and humiliation." Margaret's face reddened. "Ma'am, I was simply adhering to protocol. Your protocol does not involve accusing a child of suspicious conduct because he arrived with cash on his birthday." Kenneth intervened promptly. "Dr. Monroe, I want to assure you that was not our goal." Alicia turned slightly, her hands remaining still at her sides. "Are you aware of how many accounts my company maintains with this bank, Mr. Flores?" Kenneth moved slightly. "I understand there are three. Langford Innovations, your personal account, and Monroe Education Group." "That is correct," she confirmed. "I have directly instructed more than 300 young students in this city regarding financial literacy, predominantly black and brown, many of whom are entering environments where they face immediate judgment. Therefore, I am not unfamiliar with this discussion." A silence descended upon the lobby. Even the toddler from earlier had become quiet. Margaret began to speak, but Alicia raised her hand, not to cut her off, but to momentarily suspend the discussion. "This extends beyond just Tyrese. This concerns every child who enters a place like this and is told, whether subtly or overtly, that they don't belong, that they must demonstrate something that no one else is required to demonstrate. Do you request state identification from every child, or just mine?" Margaret's voice lowered. "That isn't equitable. It's unjust to impose that burden on a 12-year-old simply because you presume something about him before he even greets you." Alicia retreated slightly and indicated her son. He entered the space, behaving as we instruct parents to guide their children. Rather than receiving recognition for his efforts, he was perceived as a potential problem. The elderly couple in the waiting area briefly looked at each other. One of them offered a deliberate nod. While not everyone appeared at ease, they seemed alert. Tyrese observed his mom with wide eyes. It wasn't simply the content of her words that surprised him, but also her delivery. Calm, deliberate. She didn't raise her voice, nor did she seek sympathy. She spoke truthfully before those who were present. "I'm not requesting an apology," Alicia stated finally. "I am requesting awareness." Yet, as the impact of her words became apparent, Tyrese remained silent, as something within him still felt the need to complete what he began. A brief stillness fell over the room. Kenneth stood rigidly behind the counter, his hands clasped together, reminiscent of a school principal delivering a lecture. Margaret's gaze had dropped, focused on the laminated calendar close to her keyboard. The branch was silent, unusually so. However, Tyrese wasn't noticing any of that. He remained looking at his mom. She hadn't spoken loudly. She didn't need to. The way she held herself was striking, as if each word she selected was a brick intentionally set. He understood she was upset. He sensed it in the tightness of her shoulders. Beyond that, she possessed a protective, steady, and unwavering nature. He aspired to emulate those qualities. "Tyrese," she stated, turning slightly. He paused, surprised by her question. He had assumed she would manage the situation as she typically did, sheltering him and resolving issues to spare him involvement. However, she was now presenting him with an option. He glanced at the adults behind the counter. He observed the woman who had made him feel like an outsider. He glanced back at his mom, who stood there as a barrier between him and a world that hadn't yet learned how to properly interact with him. He inhaled deeply. "I came in here to complete the tasks adults had instructed me to do," he stated. His voice faltered slightly, but he persevered. "Preserve my money, manage it independently, demonstrate responsibility." His hand clenched around the unused envelope still folded in his pocket. "I wasn't anticipating any festivities or the like," he added. Margaret looked up at him now, Her expression had softened. I had everything needed: my belongings, my account information, and my school ID. I remained composed throughout, even when I couldn't grasp the reason for the different treatment. He didn't explicitly state it was due to my race, wasn't necessary. The atmosphere made the assumption clear. I simply wanted to deposit my money in the bank, Tyrese concluded. That was my only wish. He turned to Kenneth. My hope is that no one else experiences something similar. Kenneth nodded slowly. You're right, and I'm sorry you were made to feel that way. Alicia listened, raising her chin slightly. We should have done better, he added. Margaret, who had been quiet, finally spoke. I misread the situation. I did, and I'm sorry, Tyrese. Her tone softened now, not entirely without defensiveness, but closer to sincerity. The reason for her words, guilt or understanding, remained unclear, but at least she acknowledged it. Alicia didn't respond immediately. She turned to Tyrese once more. Ready? She inquired. He offered a small nod. Not yet. Kenneth appeared puzzled. Is there anything else we can do? Tyrese turned back towards the counter. Can I make the deposit again? A moment of quiet followed. Alicia smiled faintly. Kenneth quietly chuckled. It's already been processed, but we can review it again. Symbolically, Tyrese moved forward and retrieved the blue bank booklet. Kenneth accepted the booklet and retrieved a new deposit slip. Please complete this one, he said. Tyrese took the pen and wrote deliberately, ensuring a steady hand. He presented the slip, and Kenneth stamped it, acknowledging the action even though it held no practical effect. The focus transcended the numerical entries within the system. It represented a symbolic act of recovering what had been unjustly lost. Margaret observed quietly as Tyrese retrieved the slip, folded it into his booklet, and faced his mom again. All done, he announced. Let's go, Alicia responded. Yet, her gaze paused briefly. On Margaret, then Kenneth, then the young man her son was rapidly developing. But outside, as they entered the bright Arizona sunlight, an unspoken tension remained between them, something that required discussion before they departed. The parking lot was half full, a typical midday pause where heat waves rose from windshields and voices floated from open car windows. Inside the Monroe sedan, everything was still. Alicia closed the driver's side door carefully. Tyrese fastened his seatbelt, then looked out the window for a few silent moments. The building appeared different now, smaller, less imposing. But the feeling of tension in his chest hadn't completely disappeared. Want to talk about it? She asked gently. He didn't respond immediately. Why did she look at me that way? Alicia didn't hurry with her response. She reclined in her seat and inhaled, as if she's answered this question previously, but not in this manner. Because she formed an opinion about who you are before you spoke. That's unfair. No, she stated. It isn't. Tyrese glanced at the envelope once more. Still empty. Still neatly folded. I haven't done anything wrong. You haven't? She inquired. Sometimes the world reacts to perceptions rather than reality. Tyrese remained silent. Then, a question arose. Would she have requested all of that if I were a white kid? Alicia's jaw tightened subtly. It wasn't anger, but more like a pain she'd learned to carry so well that it didn't always surface. She responded no. Probably not. They contemplated that reality for a time. It was an uncomfortable feeling. It wasn't meant to be pleasant, but it was truthful. I felt lost for words at that moment. Tyrese spoke softly. I believe that expressing frustration would only exacerbate the situation. Alicia turned to him. You performed precisely as expected. You remained composed. You voiced your thoughts when prepared, and you presented the truth. Tyrese made eye contact with her. You did not appear displeased that I initially remained silent. She shook her head. No, I felt admiration for you. I still feel admiration for you. He nodded slowly. The tightness in his shoulders began to lessen slightly. Alicia adjusted her seatbelt and focused on the road ahead. This is the reason I encourage you. Why do I expect so much? Not because perfection is required, but because sometimes that's what people expect just for you to be equal. I hate that. I know, she responded. Me too. A beat passed. I wanted her to feel embarrassed, Tyrese said. I wanted her to feel small. I get that, she said. But the goal isn't to shrink people down. It's to open their eyes. Let them carry what they've done, so they can choose to do better next time. But what if they don't? Then that's on them, not on you. Tyrese rested his head against the seat. She didn't offer an apology until you arrived. Alicia observed her son, speaking softly. Occasionally, individuals only behave properly when they understand that the person they are disregarding possesses influence. It isn't correct. However, it occurs. She ought to have treated me with respect from the beginning. Agreed. They remained silent for a brief period. A vehicle parked 2 spaces down, and a woman emerged with a boy, approximately 5 or 6 years old, clutching a plastic coin bank. Alicia offered a small smile. Notice that? Another parent guiding their child in learning about money. Tyrese gazed out the window. I hope he isn't subjected to the experiences I faced. I hope someone like you is present when he arrives. That comment brought a smile to Tyrese's face for the first time that day. He looked at his mom. Do you believe I made a positive impact today? Alicia hesitated. I believe you accomplished something few people would do. You entered there with pride. You exited with your dignity. And along the way, you compelled people to confront their own reflections. He gazed back at the building. Next time I visit, I desire to go alone again. Alicia smiled. That's wise. As she inserted the key into the ignition, there remained one more lesson Tyrese needed to grasp. Something she'd withheld since the moment he entered that bank. The car emitted a quiet hum as Alicia turned the key, but she paused before driving away. Her hand rested on the gear shift, her fingers still for a moment. There's something I didn't tell you, she said, her eyes fixed forward. Tyrese looked over. About what? About that bank? About Margaret. He waited. I've been there before, she said a few months ago. I was opening a secondary business account, and she was the one who helped me. Tyrese blinked. Seriously? She wasn't rude, but she wasn't warm either. She recalled thinking she was distant, like she had somewhere more important to be. I dismissed it as a difficult day. He frowned. So, were you already aware of her behavior? Alicia nodded. I suspected something, but I didn't anticipate you experiencing the most significant impact. Tyrese glanced out the window again, his jaw clenched. Do you believe she acts this way toward other children? I'm unsure, Alicia responded. However, I recognize what prejudice appears as, masked by a smile or its absence. Tyrese settled back in his seat. He felt frustration, not anger, towards his mom, but rather a burden from the complexity that had enveloped something seemingly straightforward. I don't understand, he murmured. People frequently advise doing the right thing, saving money, being polite, and arriving punctually. Then this occurred. Alicia glanced at him. That's because doing the right thing doesn't always guarantee reciprocal treatment. However, it does mean you're developing something irreplaceable. What's that? Character and memory. The kind that remains with you, so when another child experiences it, you'll know precisely how to react. He paused briefly. Then, will this not be the last instance of this kind of event? Alicia slowly shook her head. Likely not. Tyrese breathed deeply through his nose. That's good, she smiled gently. But next time, the impact won't be the same. You'll be prepared, and perhaps the people around you will be more capable too, because you compelled them to confront something they wish to avoid. He examined the envelope, repeatedly opening and closing it as if it were origami. Then he stated, I still want to do it properly. The deposit? You already completed it, she responded, looking at the booklet in his lap. No, I mean return another day. Enter, complete the form, hand it to someone who shows me respect. Alicia's smile widened. You want to repeat the process. I want to conclude things correctly. He said it without pause. Alicia nodded slowly. We will do that when it's convenient for you. Tyrese straightened up. When I do, I won't question my decisions. I'll walk in as if I'm meant to be there, because you're meant to be, she said. You always have been. Don't allow a single moment to diminish you. He considered those words briefly. Afterward, he opened the glove box, placed the envelope inside, and secured it definitively. There's no reason to keep something that's meaningless. She lifted an eyebrow. Are you certain? Yes, I believe I've just made the most significant contribution already, she chuckled. A quiet feeling originating deep within his chest. You truly are your father's son, she remarked. Tyrese smiled. I say that when I'm being clever. You say it when I'm being wise. They departed the parking lot gradually, the bank receding behind them. As the car joined the main road, Tyrese looked down at the deposit booklet one last time before placing it into his backpack. The numbers were visible. However, the most significant aspect wasn't documented. He had acquired it without spending any money. However, before the day concluded, Tyrese had one final statement. It was a truth not found in formal education. They were midway back when Tyrese spoke again. His tone was even, yet his delivery prompted Alicia to look at him. You ever feel tired of having to prove something every time you walk in a room? She didn't respond immediately. The road stretched ahead, flat and unobstructed, the Arizona sun drawing distinct shadows across the dashboard. She understood the importance of thoughtful replies to questions like that. Constantly, she observed Tyrese focused on his hands. I didn't even do anything wrong, he stated. Yet it felt necessary to justify herself, even for a simple deposit. You did, she confirmed. And that's what makes you remarkable in a positive sense. You entered with honesty and departed with your dignity. You refused to allow them to diminish it. He remained silent for a period. Then, he expressed a desire to not feel anger constantly. You don't need to, she responded. Anger isn't the objective, it's a signal. What follows is what holds significance. Tyrese inclined his head, seemingly contemplating her words. So, how should I handle it? She asked. You must bear it constructively. Allow it to refine you, not to make you unyielding. He nodded, as if processing her advice. Alicia stopped at a gas station, needing to purchase a bottle of water before completing the drive. Stepping from the car, she lightly tossed her keys into Tyrese's lap. Lock the doors if you need to. I won't be long. She then entered the store. For the first time that day, Tyrese found himself alone. This time, he had only his thoughts. He glanced down at the keys, then looked back at the parking lot. It wasn't about the bank anymore. It was about the way people viewed him before he even had a chance to speak. About how his mom had faced challenges he hadn't known existed until today. He felt a sense of needing to stand with more confidence, to shoulder a greater burden, despite the unfairness of it. The car door made a sound as Alicia came back with a chilled bottle of water. She gave it to him silently, returned to the driver's seat, and fastened her seatbelt. Tyrese unscrewed the lid and drank. He said, placing the bottle down, I believe the most difficult aspect wasn't her asking all those questions. It was the expression on her face, as if I wasn't worthy of being present. Alicia nodded thoughtfully. That's the method they employ to make you vanish, she said. Not through words, but through uncertainty, through silence. With that expression, he continued, his voice gaining strength, but I didn't vanish. No, you didn't. She reached out and briefly squeezed his hand, adding, and you won't. Not now, not ever. The remainder of the drive was completed in near silence, but it was a silence that felt substantial, not devoid of meaning. As they arrived at the driveway, Tyrese moved forward and gazed at her. Alicia smiled, as she always did. I'm not just going to remember how they treated me, he stated. I'm going to remember how I responded. That's the lesson, she confirmed. That's what makes you unstoppable. Tyrese opened the door, took his backpack, and hesitated. I think next time, he said, I'll bring someone else with me, such as Jordan or Micah, and teach them how to manage it as well. Alicia's face brightened. That's what leaders do, she said. Tyrese offered a small, assured nod. So, I suppose I'm a leader now. He stepped out into the sun, and this time his footsteps didn't sound nervous or unsure. They sounded like someone who knew exactly where he was going. If this story resonated with you, even in a small way, please don't just scroll past. Share it, discuss it, because every child like Tyrese deserves to enter the world with confidence. And if you're still reading, please subscribe. There's more to come. Mr. Braddock, the calculus teacher at Eisenberg High in Elkhart, Indiana, made a light-hearted gesture, singling out the janitor for amusement in front of the class. However, when a man calmly approached the board and solved the problem with unexpected skill, the room fell silent, fundamentally altering the school's perception of him. This occurred during fourth period on a Thursday, A typical day at Eisenberg High, where students often watch the clock more than the lesson. Mr. Braddock had a certain reputation. Known for his sharp wit, impatience, and sarcastic remarks, he was a figure who evoked tolerance rather than affection. The classroom felt stale. Equations covered the whiteboard. A subtle scent of eraser dust and old sneakers permeated the air. Phones lay hidden beneath desks. A few students feigned attention, while others gazed out the window. Then, an event occurred, altering the classroom's atmosphere dramatically. While Mr. Braddock wrote another derivative on the board, a quiet squeak drifted in from the hallway. The janitor was close by, mopping just outside the classroom with his characteristic slow, steady pace. Braddock stopped speaking, looked toward the door, and gave a slight smile. Suddenly, he turned to the class and indicated the hallway. "Look who's here," he said. "Tell me, do you think you can solve this one?" He struck the board with his marker, mimicking a game show challenge. A ripple of laughter followed, not loud, but the type that makes you subtly adjust your posture, unsure of its appropriateness. Mr. Braddock smiled knowingly. "Come on, Lamar." Lamar Dorsey, a 52-year-old janitor, stood in the hallway, holding his mop. The familiar blue uniform, clean but faded, was on him, displaying L. Dorsey embroidered above his chest pocket. He remained still, showing no reaction. His gaze swept across the room. Then, deliberately, he entered. A mop rested against the wall. Several students straightened. Some anticipated a clever remark or a sudden departure. Perhaps a jest, or simply a walkout. However, that didn't happen. Instead, Lamar proceeded to the front of the room. "You mind?" he inquired quietly, indicating the board with a gesture. Braddock raised his brows. "Be my guest." Several phones silently emerged from backpacks. One girl whispered, "Is he serious?" But nobody interrupted Lamar. He picked up the marker, examined the equation, and paused, not because he was unsure, but as if he were considering something. Intensely, like someone studying a well-known map. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Then he began to write. There was no theatrics, no embellishment, just careful strokes, one line following another. The room became unnervingly quiet. The only sounds were the marker on the whiteboard and a chair creaking as someone leaned forward. Mr. Braddock crossed his arms, observing intently. His expression remained unchanged, though his jaw tightened. Lamar explained the steps aloud, his voice quiet and patient. "See, this here's a chain rule problem, but the trick is recognizing the inner function first. Once you isolate that, it becomes a lot cleaner." He moved with the ease of someone experienced, not just with the problem, but with the teaching. His manner was unassuming and not arrogant. He clarified matters straightforwardly, with clarity, as if he's dedicated more effort to instruction than to menial tasks. Upon completion, he secured the marker and retreated. The board displayed meticulous, well-structured work. He addressed Braddock, then the class. "That's one approach," he stated. And briefly, stillness reigned. A junior student in the rear murmured. He understood it correctly. Mr. Braddock remained silent. Not instantly. His mouth parted a little, but no words emerged. The silence became more pronounced than any joke he could have delivered. Lamar nodded politely and retreated to the door. He gathered his mop. There was no applause, no self-promotion, only that quiet assurance, as if he hadn't just dramatically altered the room. But as Lamar reached for the chalk, no one anticipated what would follow. No one stirred. For a complete 10 seconds, it felt as though the class had been pulled from a dream and placed into something authentic. The sort of moment that doesn't typically occur in a high school classroom. Lamar Dorsey, known as Mr. Dorsey, was in the process of leaving when a comment was made. Had he just thought that? It was Wes Hanley, a senior seated in the front row, who rarely spoke unless it concerned academic performance. He was completely serious. His eyes were wide with surprise. He glanced back at the board, as if a solution might have altered during a brief moment of closure. Braddock then spoke, his tone even and somewhat annoyed. He acknowledged that Mr. Dorsey had, nonetheless, provided the correct answer. His voice lacked its typical sarcasm. A different feeling seemed present. Perhaps confusion, or even something like discomfort. Lamar looked back. I worked with numbers extensively in the past, he stated, then offered a slight shrug. They remain with me. Several students chuckled, not directed at him this time, but because the atmosphere was easing. Lamar didn't pause for a reply. He departed, mop in hand, his shoes squeaking quietly down the hallway, as if nothing had occurred. It was as if he hadn't just resolved a complex academic challenge in less than 3 minutes without using a calculator. That's when the phones appeared. Someone had recorded the entire incident. Carly Benson, a junior in the third row, had already begun editing the video before the school bell sounded. In the hallway between classes, the topic of conversation was solely focused on the event. Did you see Mr. Dorsey? Braddock's expression. He appeared as if someone had disconnected him. Where did he acquire that knowledge? It was believed he only cleaned floors. By lunchtime, the video appeared on TikTok and then Instagram. It was unedited, simply a shaky view of Lamar's hands working on the board, accompanied by a voice saying, "Yo, he's solving it." The text accompanying the video stated, "Our janitor just outperformed the calculus teacher." Some people found it amusing. Others observed it with disbelief. Nevertheless, the excitement continued to build. In the teacher's lounge, the atmosphere was similarly charged. "Are you suggesting he completed a full derivative chain problem mentally?" inquired Ms. Lin, the physics teacher. She had paused mid-bite of her sandwich, and so did he, muttered Mr. Crane, the English teacher. Didn't use notes. Didn't even pause. It was like muscle memory. Braddock was at the corner table, seemingly grading papers. He remained silent. However, Principal Everett spoke. He had been at the school for 6 years. It was surprising that no one knew he had an academic background. People shook their heads. Few people really knew much about Lamar. He arrived early. He left late. The floors were always clean. Light bulbs rarely failed within a day. The man worked in silence. However, he was no longer simply the man behind the mop. Down the hallway, a group of students waited near the janitor's closet. They weren't there to report a spill or request a broom. They simply wanted to speak with him. One student, a 12-year-old boy holding his geometry book, inquired, "Do you tutor Mr. Dorsey?" Lamar blinked. "I haven't in a long time," he replied. "You should," the boy suggested. That was a kind thing to say. Lamar chuckled, but it wasn't unkind. "I'm simply astonished." During the third period the following day, Braddock's demeanor had changed. He refrained from making jokes. He didn't call on students arbitrarily. He spoke with his gaze directed at the board, his voice more subdued than normal. It wasn't voiced directly, but it was obvious to all. Following the class, Wes approached him. "Mr. Braddock, regarding that incident with Mr. Dorsey yesterday, he employed the very method you demonstrated last week. The chain rule, correct?" Braddock nodded once. "That is correct, only he articulated it more effectively." Braddock remained silent. However, the truly startling aspect wasn't the proposed solution itself. It was what Lamar said following it. Lamar Dorsey hadn't intended to create a disturbance. He generally avoided being the focus of attention. This had been the case since his youth. Consequently, when students began congregating near the maintenance closet simply to converse, or when teachers directed extended glances his way in the hallways, he felt uneasy. He lowered his gaze and continued with his regular activities. Restocking paper towels, repairing a leaky faucet in the boys' locker room, and cleaning cafeteria tables consumed his time. However, he began to notice a subtle change. There was a perceptible shift in how people regarded him, as if they were attempting to place him within a framework they hadn't previously recognized. This wasn't merely curiosity, it was a mixture of confusion, respect, and perhaps regret. The sensation made him uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, Principal Everett requested that he visit the front office. He entered, still wearing his gloves, his uniform slightly damp from cleaning the cafeteria sinks. He took off his cap as a gesture of respect. Everett leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped together. "Lamar, may I ask you a question? Do you have experience in education or engineering?" Lamar paused. He glanced downwards briefly, as if revisiting a long-forgotten aspect of himself. "I attended Purdue," he said softly. Mechanical engineering. Full scholarship. The principal leaned back, eyebrows raised. You serious? Was Lamar's reply. He had plans. Things got complicated. And for the first time in a long while, he began to recount the story. He'd grown up in Gary, Indiana. A bright young man, he's always been fascinated by how things worked. Motors, pulleys, anything he could take apart and put back together. His mother, Estelle, raised him and his two sisters on her own. She worked overtime at a textile plant and still found time to read to them every night. She held a deep conviction that education offered the sole path to advancement, frequently stating, books first, always. She explained that the world might attempt to deny opportunity, but possessing your own key ensured access. Lamar secured that key. He was valedictorian, a winner at the state science fair, and then received a scholarship to Purdue. During his freshman year, he was already tutoring fellow students. Instructors noticed his name on the attendance roster and took note. However, sophomore year brought a life-altering phone call. His mother had collapsed at work. Medical professionals diagnosed her with advanced cancer. When Lamar arrived at the hospital, she was struggling to remain conscious. I can handle this, she murmured. He disregarded her request and did not return home. He took a semester off from school, then another. He found employment, working in a warehouse and doing overnight shifts at a grocery store. He worked to cover expenses. Academic pursuits became less important. So did the dream. When his mother died, possessions were disorganized. He lacked a place to return to, lacked funds to complete his degree, and received no communication from a guidance counselor checking on his absence. I repeatedly thought I would return to school, Lamar told Everett. But one situation led to another. Life doesn't wait for anyone. The principal remained silent. The narrative carried weight, not melodrama. It was simply authentic, the sort of existence one rarely encounters unless actively inquired about. At his residence, Lamar stored his academic records in a box situated beneath his bed. He possessed a faded Purdue sweatshirt, an antique calculator, and a photograph of himself and his mother from orientation day. He had not used any of these items, yet he kept them. Now they were being revisited. That evening, he was seated on the rear steps of his modest apartment complex. The sky was dusky, with a stillness punctuated only by the distant murmur of vehicles. He drank tea from a metal thermos and gazed into the distance. It had been years since he's considered calculus. It had been a while since his last tutoring job, before he left school, and now it reappeared, like a familiar face at his door. But a single choice threatened to undo all his efforts. While in college, Lamar had vowed to take a brief respite, stabilize his family situation, and then complete his education successfully. However, life rarely follows plans, particularly those founded on hope. Following his mother's passing, Lamar went back to Gary, attempting to rebuild. His sisters were still in high school, struggling to manage. Bills accumulated on the counter. The landlord demanded rent, and no one from Purdue contacted him to inquire about his disappearance. He accepted any available work. He worked as a stockroom loader, a janitor at a strip mall, and provided overnight security at a shipping yard. Anything that provided sufficient income to pay the electricity bill. His education receded further and further from his immediate concerns. Initially, he would occasionally contact the university to inquire about reapplying and transferring credits. Forms were sent to him. He completed them. However, he didn't mail them. There was always an obstacle. Then came a critical moment. It occurred in late November. A man named Frank Booker, the owner of a flooring company in South Bend, had offered Lamar consistent employment. "You're capable," he stated. "Don't squander your time sweeping floors. I'll personally train you." Lamar felt hopeful again, having a genuine opportunity. However, the day before his start date, his youngest sister, Alana, was involved in a school altercation. A disagreement that quickly worsened. She had injured someone's nose. Expulsion was threatened. Lamar felt compelled to be present. No one else would support her. Consequently, he missed his first day at the flooring job. Frank reassigned the position to another person. And that was the end of it. An opportunity was lost. He relinquished his pursuit of dreams and instead prioritized stability. Years passed indistinctly. He moved from town to town, holding various jobs. He maintained a clean record and avoided legal issues, simply focusing on survival. Quietly. When he reached Elkhart in his early 40s, he wasn't seeking a fresh start. He simply wanted a reliable income. The school district provided benefits. Summers were peaceful. He accepted the janitor position without hesitation. He found it agreeable in his own way. It was predictable. The work was clean. Students left him undisturbed. Teachers offered polite smiles. He didn't anticipate friendship or belonging. He didn't require it. He remained inconspicuous. He cleaned up messes and vanished before the last bell rang. Yet, numbers remained with him. Occasionally, after successfully completing a math course, he would briefly observe the board. He'd see a formula and mentally solve it. It felt akin to muscle memory, a facet of his mind that remained keen even as other aspects succumbed to the weight of habit. He would return home, prepare a simple supper, grilled fish, brown rice, perhaps some carrots, and peruse a vintage engineering book he stored behind the cereal boxes, just to confirm his abilities. He invariably did. He simply lacked an opportunity to demonstrate them. Then Mr. Braddock addressed him that day. And now, changes were occurring, not only at school, but also within him. He reflected on the students who waited outside his supply closet with questions. He thought about Wes Hamley visiting that morning with a folded piece of paper and saying, "Mr. Dorsey, I attempted to solve that same problem. Could you review it for me?" And Lamar had, with care, methodically. He clarified where Wes had made a mistake without causing embarrassment. Wes smiled when he finally grasped the concept. It wasn't solely a matter of pride. It was about a sense of belonging. That feeling lingered. However, not everyone reacted positively. Braddock, in particular, became unusually reserved. Students observed it. Teachers observed it. The experience of being surpassed by someone he hadn't previously considered a significant figure in front of his class clearly affected him. He didn't respond aggressively. Instead, his responses became more abrupt, his tolerance diminished. Any mention of Lamar in the lounge was swiftly redirected. He was not accustomed to being overshadowed, especially not by someone who had been unknown to him until now. But life held one more surprise, and this one brought him back to mathematics. The video didn't remain within Eisenberg High. It spread beyond. It began with a local student page reposting it, accompanied by the caption, "When your janitor turns out to be smarter than your teacher." Then it appeared on a regional education forum. By the weekend, it had spread across state lines. People online were astonished. They weren't mocking Lamar, they were impressed. He explained it with greater clarity than my college professor. Someone should give this man a classroom and a chalkboard, not a mop. It's a reminder that you never know someone's story. By Monday morning, Lamar had no idea any of this was occurring. He didn't use social media. He still had a flip phone. When he arrived at work, the first thing he did was repair a jammed paper towel dispenser in the girls' bathroom, just like he always did on Mondays. But something felt different. Conversations stopped as he passed. Students nodded, not out of duty, but with an unusual sense of respect. Some even smiled, as if meeting him for the first time. "Hey, Mr. Dorsey," a girl called out as he neared the library. "You're kind of famous now." Lamar chuckled quietly. However, when he rounded the corner, Wes Hamley was there, accompanied by two other students. One held a calculus book. A problem was indicated, marked in pink. "Would you mind going through this with us?" Wes asked. Lamar looked around, seemingly confused. "You got a free period?" Someone inquired. We made time. And so, in the hallway, surrounded by lockers and science fair posters, Lamar sat down on the floor with three teenagers and guided them through a multivariable equation. Step by step, line by line. He didn't lecture them. He engaged with them. It wasn't boisterous or extravagant, but a significant moment unfolded. Further down the hallway, someone recorded the incident. Lamar wasn't informed. He likely would have disapproved. Returning to the office, Principal Everett was speaking with a member of the local school board. Affirming the information, she stated, "Lamar Dorsey. He's been with us for 6 years. No, he's not faculty. He's a custodian." She hesitated, then responded, "Well, I wouldn't describe it as unorthodox. I'd say it was overlooked." Simultaneously, in the teacher's lounge, Braddock was reviewing an email shared by a parent containing a link to the now viral video. He closed the laptop without watching it. That afternoon, Everett called Lamar back in, offered him a seat. Lamar stayed standing. "I've got a request from the board," the principal said. "They want to know if you'd be interested in running an after-school tutoring program. Small group, voluntary, just a trial run." Lamar didn't answer right away. "You'd be paid, of course," Everett added. "This isn't about changing your existing responsibilities, but rather expanding them." Reflecting on the skills he still possesses, Lamar glanced at his hands. They were calloused, clean, and worn. "I haven't taught in a long time," he stated. "You haven't ceased to know," Everett responded. Lamar raised his gaze. There was no strain evident in the man's tone, only a straightforward suggestion. "I will consider it," he said. That evening, he retrieved the aged cardboard box from beneath his bed. It contained the Purdue sweatshirt, the transcripts, and the orientation photo. He hadn't touched it in years. He spread everything out on the table. The paper had yellowed slightly. The edges were curled, but the words remained. That was the nature of knowledge. It didn't fade. It simply waited. He didn't need to become popular online. He didn't care about the views or the comments. But knowing he could still make a difference resonated with him. However, while some were impressed, others were not pleased by his growing recognition. As Lamar gained more recognition, the school environment started to change. This transformation initially manifested in the student body. Those who previously ignored him in the hallways began to greet him. Some even sought his assistance with homework during class breaks. Within 2 weeks, a small group of students had informally established what they termed Dorsey sessions. After school, they would gather in the library, notebooks ready, concentrating as Lamar elucidated ideas with a surprising clarity that everyone acknowledged. Soon, teachers noticed. Ms. Lynn, the physics teacher, was the first to visit the library and observe him assisting the students. "You possess a talent," she remarked gently, "and it's not limited to calculations." However, not all reactions were positive. Mr. Braddock had remained silent regarding Lamar since the initial event. Within the teacher's lounge, he presented an outward appearance of normalcy. However, his silences betrayed a lingering bitterness. His speech was concise and abrupt. He avoided direct eye contact with Lamar and never referenced calculus. During a parent-teacher meeting, when Lamar's increasing impact on the students was discussed, Braddock stated, "It's good they're interested in math. Let's just make sure we don't blur the line between instruction and inspiration." While seemingly courteous, the underlying tone was unmistakable to everyone present. The principal didn't ignore the situation. He summoned Braddock to his office one morning and explained the issue directly. "I know it was difficult," Everett remarked, "but Lamar didn't shame you. He motivated them," Braddock conceded, adjusting in his chair. "He may lack formal credentials, but he's educated significantly more than we initially understood. And crucially, he's connecting with students in a manner that we haven't been able to." Braddock started to speak, then stopped. There was little to add. Lamar continued with his established schedule. He didn't request an official position. He didn't desire any preferential consideration. However, when Principal Harding suggested a small payment to continue the tutoring sessions, he agreed. The motivation wasn't financial, it simply felt appropriate. Consequently, he began carrying a small binder. Within it were pages of problems, blank worksheets, and notes he'd written by hand. During breaks, he'd sit in the back corner of the cafeteria and jot down formulas from memory, sometimes acknowledging a student who'd call out, "Hey, Mr. D." One afternoon, Carly, the student who filmed the original clip, approached him near the vending machines. "Did you ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Lamar paused before replying. "I want to build things. Teach later, maybe, but life had different ideas." Carly responded, handing him a new mechanical pencil. "I think you're doing both now." He smiled. "Thank you." However, beneath this pleasantness, there was underlying tension. Some parents had begun contacting the school. While the response was largely positive, a single, anonymous concern reached the board. The question raised was whether it was appropriate for a janitor to tutor students within the school. Concerns were also voiced regarding his certification and background checks for instruction. Everett addressed the matter promptly. He is a district employee and has not acted inappropriately. It was suggested that if genuine concern was the driver, a direct conversation with me would have occurred. He did not inform Lamar about the complaint. Nevertheless, Lamar sensed a subtle tension present. Some individuals seemed unsure how to perceive him now that he no longer blended into the periphery. Then, one afternoon, Braddock took an unexpected action. He entered the library during one of Lamar's tutoring sessions. He observed silently from a distance as Lamar explained integrals to a group of 4 students. After roughly 10 minutes, he approached. "Do you mind if I sit in?" Braddock inquired. Lamar looked up. His expression remained unchanged. He gestured toward a chair. The students laughed, just enough to lighten the moment. Braddock smirked. For once, it wasn't mean. They sat together that day, saying little, but it was a start. Lamar Dorsey wasn't interested in titles. He had something else in mind. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. For Lamar Dorsey, standing at the whiteboard in the library with students gathered around, it was never about redemption or revenge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He didn't seek recognition. He simply showed up for them, the kids, the ones who reminded him of the boy he once was. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, that corner of the library filled with chatter, questions, scribbled notes, and wide eyes as Lamar walked students through math problems they once feared. Not because he possessed all the answers, but because he helped them believe they could discover those answers themselves. That's what mattered. Isaiah, a freshman who previously struggled with algebra last semester, is now confidently solving quadratic equations. Tasha, who once disliked math, is now conducting brief study groups on weekends for her cousins, utilizing notes from Lamar. Lamar didn't lecture from the front of the room like a conventional teacher. Instead, he sat alongside his students, engaged in conversation, and posed questions before providing answers. Consequently, an increasing number of teachers began visiting. They weren't there to monitor, but simply to observe his methods. Ms. Lynn inquired about utilizing some of his explanations in her class. Coach Rivera asked if Lamar would assist in establishing a summer preparation group for incoming freshmen. Even Braddock, typically hesitant and prideful, began visiting frequently. While not every day, he visited often enough. He would quietly suggest a couple of additional problems and eventually started offering words of encouragement to the students. The sharpness in his voice lessened. A change occurred within him, softening his demeanor. During one tutoring session, Braddock stayed behind after the students had departed. "You know," he remarked, glancing at the board, "I once believed this position conferred significance upon me. That teaching provided authority." Lamar remained silent. "But you're showing me what it truly involves, consistently being present and ensuring that each moment has value." Lamar simply nodded in agreement. Everyone occasionally strays from their path. He was not one to bear resentment. He had no need to. Principal Everett summoned him again a month later. A suggestion was put forward to establish his sessions as a non-credit elective class next semester, designed for enrichment and to build students' confidence. Everett cautioned that we would need to navigate some administrative processes. Lamar responded, shaking his head gently, and stated that he appreciated the offer but did not require the formal recognition. He preferred to maintain a simple approach, encouraging attendance based on genuine interest rather than a fixed schedule. Everett agreed, nodding, and assured him that they would provide support in any way possible. News of his efforts extended past the school district. A reporter from a local news outlet visited to conduct an interview. Lamar chose to keep his comments brief, avoiding sensationalism and self-promotion. "I'm simply demonstrating what they already possess," he stated. "Sometimes it requires a bit of time to recognize it." In the spring, Eisenberg High held its yearly student showcase, featuring science projects, art displays, and choir performances. In one corner of the gym, a booth called Dorsey's Table showcased student reflections on math, life, and confidence. Many students wrote about how Lamar had helped them discover more about themselves. This wasn't because he provided answers, but because he listened and showed belief. By the end of the night, people had stopped asking, Is he the janitor? Instead, they were saying, that's Mr. Dorsey. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't give a speech. He stood near the table, smiled, and expressed gratitude to the students who approached. Afterwards that evening, returning to his apartment, he retrieved the well-worn Purdue sweatshirt from the box beneath his bed. He refrained from wearing it. Instead, he folded it carefully, placed it inside a fresh storage container, and added a file containing student thank you notes alongside it. He understood that legacy isn't defined by positions. It's about the impact you create in others. He didn't require completing school to instruct. He didn't need a degree to guide. He simply needed to be present each day and demonstrate genuine care. And that's precisely what he intended to continue. Thank you for hearing Lamar's story. If it resonated with you, if it brought to mind someone you may have underestimated or someone who offered you support, please subscribe and share it with someone who could benefit from it. Because sometimes the most brilliant intellects reside in the most unassuming environments. A man struck a 53-year-old woman on public transit, mistakenly believing she was alone and vulnerable. He was unaware that her husband held the position of the most respected officer in town. It had been a challenging day, characterized by delays and setbacks. When Vanessa Kirkland arrived at the Blue Line platform in downtown Sacramento, her heels were causing discomfort, her back ached, and she was 2 missed calls behind schedule on her way to the train. The time was approaching 6:15 p.m. The sun had already begun to descend behind the old courthouse building. She looked at her phone, but did not check the notifications. Not tonight. Vanessa was 53, possessing a sharp mind, a warm voice, and consistently wearing her silver-framed glasses and demonstrating patience. She worked as a lead advocate at a nonprofit legal center, experiencing long days, emotionally draining environments, and paperwork that was constant. Nevertheless, she wouldn't trade it. Assisting individuals, particularly families navigating a system they found perplexing or untrustworthy, felt like a duty, not merely a profession. As the train arrived, she boarded and looked for a place to sit. Limited space was available. She located a partially filled row towards the center and settled in with a soft exhale, placing her tote bag next to her. The atmosphere was largely peaceful. Passengers were absorbed in their phones, listening to music or browsing on screens. A teenager in a school hoodie, chewing gum and watching something with the volume a little too high, sat directly across from her. 2 seats to her left, a couple of nurses still in scrubs spoke softly in Spanish. It was nothing out of the ordinary. The train began to move. Vanessa rested her head and breathed out. She considered dinner, likely just leftovers. Perhaps she would reheat that lentil stew, or possibly just cereal and a long bath. Her thoughts wandered. But then a voice arose. It was loud, rapid, and smug. "Excuse me, I'm going to ask you something." She didn't move at first, just opened her eyes slowly. Across the aisle, a man had gotten on at the last stop. Mid-20s, tall, wiry, and loud, wore a sleeveless hoodie and had headphones around his neck. He was looking straight at her, grinning. Vanessa blinked once, didn't say a word. He leaned a little closer. "I'm serious. You're sitting up here as if you're running for mayor." Wearing a complete church ensemble, I observed her. A nearby teenager chuckled softly. The man visibly straightened, seeming to relish the attention. "You must be going somewhere important, ma'am," he stated. She remained silent. Adjusting her glasses, she maintained a dignified posture and subtly turned her head toward the window. However, he wasn't finished. He began pacing with deliberate, measured steps down the aisle, gesturing at various passengers. "People like her," he declared, "always act as if they are superior. Sit straight, avert your gaze, and remain silent." It seemed as though others judged us harshly. People began to notice. A woman near the front briefly looked back before quickly averting her gaze. A young man behind Vanessa subtly reached for his phone. Vanessa felt no surge of panic. Years of practice had taught her to remain composed during confrontations. She recognized this behavior, a display of confidence fueled by the desire for attention. A man who felt more powerful when others appeared diminished. She spoke calmly. "You should take a seat." Her voice was even, neither raised nor trembling, simply resolute. The man paused. He paused, appearing hesitant. Then, he tilted his head. "Oh, are you giving orders now? Do you have a badge or something?" Vanessa remained unmoved. "No, but you're embarrassing yourself in front of a train full of strangers." His smile briefly wavered. Then he moved closer, too close. However, the atmosphere in the car shifted. People were observing now, more than previously. There was tension, certainly, but also a sense of anticipation, as if everyone was awaiting the next development. Vanessa remained still, her gaze fixed on him, her hands resting in her lap. He smirked. "You got a mouth on you. Let's see if you talk like that when I'm a little closer." But he didn't know who he was addressing, and he was about to discover that the hard way. The train rattled forward, cutting through the city as if oblivious to the escalating tension inside Car 7. The man, later identified as Kyle Dunham, aged 26, with a record full of petty nonsense, stood inches from Vanessa now. A subtle aroma of malt liquor and mint gum emanated from his breath. He lowered himself, observing her with the gaze of a child studying a motionless doll, anticipating her to break eye contact first. She remained steadfast. "You one of those strong, independent types, huh?" He expectorated. "Always got something smart to say when there's people around to protect you. But you on your own now, sweetheart." Vanessa released a barely perceptible sigh, the kind intended to convey disappointment, not weariness. "I'm not on my own," she stated. Kyle surveyed the surroundings with a flourish. "Oh, who has you back, then?" he called out, raising his voice. "Does anyone among you want to come and save Grandma over here?" He paused. "No, I didn't expect so." The word grandma stung more than he anticipated, not because of her age, but because of the implication behind it. It suggested she was diminished, that women aged and became invisible, useless, laughable, something to ridicule, not to honor. Nevertheless, she remained composed. "You're embarrassing yourself," she stated gently. "That's what bullies do when they are afraid." Kyle appeared startled, freezing in place. "How do you know my name?" he demanded. Vanessa subtly shifted forward, her voice remaining composed. "You mentioned it earlier, on the phone, prior to boarding the train. That was a deception." He denied having done so, but her statement unnerved him, prompting him to question what else she might know. "You're crazy," he mumbled. Vanessa turned back toward the window, not in a dismissive manner, but as if he were insignificant. This was the catalyst. Kyle's pride couldn't withstand the rejection. The audience had fallen silent. His performance was unsuccessful, and a bitter expression tightened his features. "Finish speaking now?" he demanded. "All that talking, and now you're afraid?" Vanessa remained silent, so he gently nudged her shoulder, a clear indication that this was no longer a verbal exchange. A sharp intake of breath came from the rear of the vehicle immediately. Vanessa raised her gaze slowly, maintaining her composure and silence. "Kyle," she stated, "this is your final opportunity to take a seat and depart with some measure of self-respect." Kyle's thoughts had vanished. He was consumed by anger. Humiliated, vulnerable, and needing to regain command, he struck her. The sound was distinct, a smack of skin against skin. Her glasses moved slightly. Her head tilted a little due to the impact. Exclamations arose, escalating into a commotion. People stood up. Phones appeared. A voice called out from the rear. Vanessa simply blinked, then remained still. She carefully straightened her glasses, neatly arranged a strand of hair behind her ear, then fixed her gaze directly upon him. "You have just committed a significant error." Kyle hesitated briefly, his hands still raised, his breathing now shallow. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his voice softer. She inclined her head. "You'll find out soon enough." Two rose back. The young man who had been quietly recording rose and walked to the rear of the car. He had observed something in her eyes, something unyielding, not fearful. It prompted his movement. A voice murmured, "She's important. I believe she's someone." Another voice followed. "Is that the chief's wife?" "That's the police chief's wife." And now Kyle was hearing the murmur. "What?" he said. No one answered. But the mood in the car shifted. It had gone from outrage to recognition. This wasn't just a woman on a train anymore. This was somebody. Vanessa stayed still. Her cheek stung. Her hand trembled just a little in her lap. But she didn't let it show. Instead, she reached for her phone, opened a text, typed 5 words, "Call me when you can." Sent. She glanced upward, not toward Kyle, but at the doors. The train was one stop from Curtis Park Station, and that was the extent of his remaining time. Curtis Park Station was less than 2 minutes away now. But for all those inside the train car, time began to lengthen. No one was speaking anymore. Not genuinely. There were hushed tones, murmurs, yes. But the atmosphere had changed, becoming concentrated and oppressive. Kyle sensed it. He disliked it. He positioned himself in the middle of the aisle, as if he had something yet to demonstrate. His gaze now moved frequently, scanning the passengers who avoided eye contact. He observed those recording, resenting their lack of laughter. They weren't fearful of him, either. Not anymore. "Man, you're tripping," he mumbled. She started it, trying to appear superior. No one reacted. Across from him, Vanessa had repositioned her tote onto her lap. Her fingers were clenched around the straps, her thumb rhythmically stroking a small stitched detail. She felt no fear. However, anger simmered within her. A quiet anger, an anger that held back, an anger that was justified. Her skin still felt hot. The mark of his hand remained visible. She refrained from touching it. Maintaining a composed stance, she kept her shoulders straight. She was aware of the scrutiny, not only from those with phones, but also from the observant individuals who had witnessed similar incidents and felt powerless. Now, their attention was on her, and so was Kyle's. "You think you're better than me," he hissed suddenly. "That's what this is. You people always act like you're too good." Vanessa finally looked at him. Her voice was low. "I don't think I'm better than you. I think you're making choices you're going to regret." "You threatening me?" He shot back. "No," she said. "I'm warning you. There's a difference." The train gave a mechanical groan as it began slowing into Curtis Park. The lights flickered once overhead. Kyle turned toward the door, fidgeting. A woman 2 seats down whispered something to her boyfriend. He nodded subtly, moved his hand into his jacket pocket, a badge, an off-duty officer merely awaiting the signal. And then Kyle turned back one last time. "You ain't nothing but a loudmouth in a skirt," he spat. "Nobody gonna save you." And with that, he reared his hand back again. But this time someone moved. Not Vanessa, not the off-duty cop. A man, tall, with a beard and still wearing a dusty construction vest from work, moved quickly from the rear of the car. He seized Kyle's wrist as he started to swing and pulled it down forcefully. "Try that again, and I'll break your arm," the man stated, his voice calm but menacing. Kyle attempted to free himself, but was unable to. The man's grip was stronger and more resolute. "Finished?" he inquired. Kyle swore, recoiled, and stumbled toward the opposite wall of the train. He appeared like a trapped creature, snarling more from panic than from any sense of dignity. Vanessa rose. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't theatrical. Just even. She surveyed the car, noting the woman with her phone, the young man in the hoodie, the child in the back feigning disinterest. Then she looked at Kyle. "I won't file charges for what you just did," she stated, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "But someone will. Someone invariably does. And when they do, I hope it's recorded." The train emitted a hiss as the doors opened. Curtis Park Station. Light flooded in from the platform. There, on the platform, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers, stood Darius Kirkland. He wasn't wearing a uniform. It wasn't necessary. He wore a black button-down shirt and slacks, and his expression was stern and intense. He boarded the train. Silence filled the space. Kyle stared at him, puzzled. "Who?" Darius spoke, his tone direct. Kyle remained still. Darius advanced 1 step. Now, a badge appeared, revealed with quiet assurance. The name was visible. Kirkland. Kyle's gaze shifted to Vanessa. An understanding dawned. That name, her. "Oh no," he breathed. The off-duty officer behind him placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go." "I didn't know." Kyle shouted. "Yo, I didn't know who she was." Darius said nothing. Vanessa stepped off the train first. She didn't look back. But the man who slapped her would never forget the moment he realized who she was, nor how close he came to losing a lot more than his pride. They walked Kyle off the platform like a child being removed from class for misbehaving. This wasn't a school setting, and no message would be sent home. The train departed behind them. Vanessa maintained a steady, even pace as she walked. Darius walked beside her, mostly silent. He didn't need to speak. His jaw was tense, not with anger, but with controlled composure. Years of policing had shown him the value of knowing when to speak and when silence was more impactful. Behind them, Kyle was guided to a bench close to the platform stairs. He was breathing rapidly, his eyes wide, still processing what had occurred. A plainclothes officer stood close by, observing with little visible emotion. Vanessa reduced her speed and then spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm okay." Darius looked at her, his eyes showing a trace of gentleness for the first time since boarding the train. "I know you are," he replied, "but I'm not." He hesitated. "I saw the entire video before I arrived. The initial message I received was from Naomi Simmons. Do you recall her? From Housing Court?" Vanessa gave a single nod. She witnessed the event as it unfolded, communicating it to me in just 4 words. "Is this your wife?" Vanessa released a sigh that mingled amusement and weary comfort. "You should have observed the child in the 3rd row," she remarked. He attempted to disappear the instant that boy began to be noisy, resembling Darren when he would feign sleep to evade tasks. Darius laughed softly. "I long for that boy," she acknowledged, her eyes wandering across the platform. Many people on that train likely recognized this scenario. However, this time the events unfolded differently. He touched her shoulder gently. "It's because you didn't react," she said. "That alters everything." A few yards behind them, Kyle began to fall apart. Not from guilt, not yet, but from fear. The fog lifted, and the man he slapped was standing nearby, shaking hands with law enforcement, while his own hands were held beneath his thighs like a child avoiding reprimand. An officer spoke to him, and his reply was abrupt and overly loud. Darius overheard. "I didn't even hit her that hard." He glanced at Vanessa, his expression remaining composed. "Do you mind if I handle this?" She gave an affirmative nod. "I trust you." Darius then proceeded back toward Kyle, his steps deliberate and controlled, as if approaching a speaker's platform rather than a bench. Kyle sat up straighter as he noticed Darius's approach. "Yo, look, I didn't know who she was, man. I didn't know she was, like, married to a cop. I believe she was simply just what?" Darius interrupted. "Tell me." Kyle's mouth opened, but he didn't speak. Darius sat beside him, maintaining a comfortable distance. "You thought she was merely a woman. Alone. An easy target." Kyle's lips tightened, seeking an explanation. "She was speaking her mind." "No," Darius responded, his voice calm. She was demonstrating composure. "That's not a common sight, is it? I didn't harm her in that way, though. You made contact with her. You placed your hands on her. Before an audience. Recorded on camera. And then there was another attempt." Kyle scanned the area, as if searching for support. But the platform was empty. There was no one to assist him. No one ever did for people like Vanessa. "That was intentional," Darius stated. "You're fortunate because she's extending understanding that others wouldn't. But don't misinterpret that as a sign of vulnerability." Kyle lowered his gaze. His earlier arrogance diminished to a smaller form. The inflated self-assurance had vanished. He appeared more like a boy now, lost, tired, and suddenly very aware of how much worse things could have been. "What's going to happen to me?" he asked. "That depends," Darius said. "Right now, you're being detained. There's an outstanding warrant on you for a missed court date from 3 months ago." Kyle's mouth dropped open. Unrelated, but not forgotten. Darius stood up. "And later?" "That depends on what kind of man you decide to be when you walk out of holding." He turned, not waiting for a reply, and returned to Vanessa, who was now seated close to a column, eyes closed in a brief moment of quiet. However, the complete story wasn't finished, and its full impact hadn't completely arrived. At least, not yet. They didn't depart the station immediately. Vanessa had taken a place on the lengthy metal bench beside the wall, sheltered by the weathered Curtis Park sign. She sat straight, legs crossed at the ankle, and her hand were finally relaxed. A stillness had returned, the type often present after a disturbance. Darius stood a short distance away, holding a phone to his ear and speaking softly. Vanessa couldn't discern his words, but she understood his demeanor. It was the voice he employed when rectifying another's blunder. Following a few minutes, he ended the call, approached her, and sat next to her. "They're taking him to county," he stated. "He isn't facing charges yet for the slap. Not unless you request it." Vanessa remained silent for a moment. She wasn't trying to be elusive. She simply needed a short time to consider what was most important. "I won't push," she stated following a brief silence. "Let the warrant take care of it. That's sufficient for now," Darius agreed slowly, nervously biting his lower lip. He acknowledged her fortunate position. They remained seated next to each other. People passed them on the platform, some offering curious looks, some murmuring as they recognized her from the videos already in circulation. Vanessa had experienced widespread online attention previously. However, nothing like this. Typically, the shared content consisted of excerpts from her addresses at city forums or housing events. Previously, a video of her embracing a woman who had recently won a child custody case had garnered thousands of likes. However, this situation was different. Now, she was the woman on the train, and her face, still faintly marked where Kyle's hand had landed, was circulating across timelines and news feeds in real time. She anticipated the consequences: comment sections, opinions, outrage, and debate. Some might describe her as a hero. Others might perceive her as lenient for not responding in kind. Still others would likely seek to place blame. Darius broke the silence. "Remember that speech I gave last week?" He began. "About dignity, public space, and consequence?" She replied, "Yes, I was in the front row." He continued, "I said every citizen deserves to move through their city without fear. That is the baseline, not the luxury." She nodded. He went on, "When I said that, I was thinking about everyone. Children walking to school, grandparents catching the bus, teachers, nurses, grocery clerks. I hadn't been thinking about you," she acknowledged. "I know," she said gently, "and I regret that I hadn't." Vanessa turned to him. "Please don't do that." He lowered his gaze. "You shouldn't have been in that situation." She offered a brief laugh. "Do you believe I haven't faced worse?" His eyes rose. "I've lived 53 years in this skin, Darius. On this earth, in this body. I've been followed, yelled at, disrespected, dismissed, and talked over. It simply so happened they were recorded." He showed no smile. Yet, he seemed to grasp the sentiment. "You've always been stronger than I remarked. "No," she replied. "I'm simply more experienced." A train whistle echoed as a train arrived at the station. A different vehicle, different travelers, the same city. A young woman in scrubs drew near carefully, her gaze shifting between them. "Excuse me, Mrs. Kirkland?" she inquired. Vanessa turned. "Yes, I just wanted to express my gratitude," she said, "for the way you manage him, for maintaining your dignity." Vanessa rose, offered her hand. "What's your name?" Rosa replied, "I'm a nurse at St. Joseph's." "You had a long shift?" Vanessa nodded. "You take care of people all day?" "Thank you." Rosa appeared taken aback by the courtesy. She offered a small nod and departed. Darius rose to stand next to his wife. "Let's go home." But Vanessa didn't move immediately. She glanced around the platform one last time, observing the train tracks, the benches, the signage, and the flow of people as if nothing had occurred. It felt as if time had restarted. "I'll ride the train tomorrow," she stated. "Are you certain?" "Yes. And the following day. And the day after that. I refuse to be silenced simply because someone is unfamiliar with me," Darius said, placing a gentle hand on her back. However, as they departed the station, neither of them realized the extent to which this moment would affect those beyond the train car. This became clear when the news broke. By the time they arrived at their home in Southland Park, Vanessa's phone had received more than 20 notifications. Darius had received a significant influx of communication. Friends, journalists, colleagues, and individuals they hadn't spoken to in years suddenly recalled their contact information. She chose not to respond to most of these inquiries. The incident had already been reported in the local news by 9 p.m. One news source titled their report "Community Leader Assaulted on Light Rail. Suspect Apprehended at Station." Another opted for a more dramatic headline: "Slap on the Train Sparks Debate Over Civility and Race." However, the video clips were the content that spread most rapidly. A 16-second vertical video, filmed by someone sitting 3 rows back, captured Kyle's words. "This is Arte Lance." It showed the slap and the subsequent moment where she met his gaze, appearing unaffected by his action. Within hours, the video surpassed 100,000 views, then 200, and finally 500,000. Each comment offered an opinion. Some praised her composure, others questioned why no one intervened earlier, and predictably, some found fault. Daria was sitting on the bed's edge, looking at news articles, her jaw tight. Vanessa entered from the bathroom, her face freshly washed and her hair wrapped. "You should put that away," Vanessa said. Daria looked up. "I keep reading these comments. People analyzing what you should have said, what you didn't say. It's as if you were putting on a show. That's the internet." Daria replied, "I simply dislike seeing you transformed into a symbol." Vanessa lifted an eyebrow. "That has been occurring since I was 13 years old. The first instance I experienced being followed in a drugstore simply for wearing lip gloss marked a turning point." Daria sighed. "I know. I only wanted you to find some quiet." "I have quiet," she replied, "and I still do. That boy didn't deprive me of anything. In fact, he provided a space for me to express what I've always felt." He looked at her, pausing. "That regardless of your identity, respect isn't gained through increased volume or physical force. It's demonstrated by how you regard those who are not indebted to you." She positioned herself beside him, carefully taking the phone from his grasp and placing it on the nightstand. "You recall what you told the academy class last spring?" she inquired. "Which part?" He responded, "We don't train for revenge. We train for response." Darius chuckled softly. "I borrowed that line from my grandfather." "Well, you gave it meaning," she replied. "It's the same reason I refrained from reacting with force today. You address situations as they arise, not according to others' expectations, but as they require." A pause. "Did you see how many people were watching?" She continued. "If I had lost control, it wouldn't have been about him anymore. It would have become a completely different situation." Darius nodded slowly. "You are correct." At that moment, a new message appeared on Vanessa's phone. This one was not from the press. It was from a mother of a high school student she'd represented 6 months earlier in a school discrimination case. She had defended him after he'd been suspended for what proved to be a false accusation by a teacher. The message stated, "My son saw the video and said, 'That's Miss Kirkland. She's real. I just want you to know how much you matter to people like us. Thank you for being who you are.'" Vanessa looked at the message for a long moment. Then she gave the phone to Darius silently. He read it, exhaled, and for the first time that night, he allowed himself to smile. "You matter," he said. "So do you," she replied. The following morning, while they were seated together on the porch enjoying coffee, a news van leisurely drove down the street. The vehicle didn't halt, but the camera within directed its view towards the house before proceeding onward. "I suspect today will be more eventful than anticipated," he remarked. "I believe every day is," Vanessa replied. She rose, stretched, and retrieved her tote bag near the door. "Are you going out?" he asked. "Yes. They require my presence at the center. We have eviction hearings scheduled for this week. I will not be absent due to someone being unable to accept a woman speaking directly." Darius also rose. "Desire a lift?" She offered a smile. "No, I will travel by train." She observed her intently for a moment. "Are you certain?" "I want to be visible. Identical seat, identical time. Because I'm not the one who requires anonymity." However, as Vanessa resumed her schedule, the events that transpired on that train continued to resonate far beyond the station, impacting dinner conversations, classrooms, news organizations, and homes throughout the nation. Following those initial moments, video recordings of Vanessa Kirkland were shared across newsrooms, courtrooms, break rooms, and barbershops. The incident generated discussion in locations that seldom addressed individuals like her, middle-aged, black, composed during pressure, unaffected by disorder. Podcasts featured it. Community forums offered perspectives. National broadcasters attempted to contextualize it, as though it conformed to a predetermined narrative concerning race, gender, and power. However, the situation defied easy categorization. That was its compelling quality. Despite everything, Vanessa consistently took the same train, often securing the same seat when available. Whenever someone recognized her, they would offer a nod or a quiet expression of gratitude. On one occasion, an elderly gentleman approached her to simply state, "I witnessed what occurred. I'm showing my granddaughter." I told her, this is how one maintains composure during a crisis. Vanessa, however, wasn't seeking acknowledgement. That's what made her actions so meaningful. She had navigated hardships previously. The difference was that the world hadn't been documenting it. The city organized a public forum 2 weeks later. Community safety, transportation, and law enforcement relations were the focus of the meeting. The hall was full. Darius was invited to speak. Attendees anticipated a discussion about crime statistics and updated patrol approaches. However, he chose to recount the story of the train. "I wasn't present at the beginning," he stated from the podium. "I wasn't seated beside her. I didn't observe the expression in his gaze or the stillness with which she remained while others spoke. But I was present when it concluded, and what I witnessed extended beyond my wife." He embodied restraint, strength, and a level of control that most of us only discuss in theory. He paused, looking out at the crowd. Her actions transcended mere self-preservation. She demonstrated that standing your ground doesn't always require physical force. Sometimes it involves maintaining composure when someone is attempting to undermine you. Vanessa remained silent that evening. She was seated in the second row, wearing a navy blazer and black slacks, her hands resting in her lap. Observing, hearing, understanding. Afterward, as they headed back to the vehicle, a young reporter stepped forward. He appeared apprehensive, holding a microphone in one hand and a phone in the other. "Mrs. Kirkland," he began, "do you believe you represent something, given what transpired?" She regarded him. "I am not a symbol," she replied. "I am a woman. I was weary. I was on the train, returning home, and someone believed that entitled them to behave as though I lacked significance, but the manner in which it was addressed. Many are describing it as impactful." She remained composed. "What's impactful," she stated, "is learning how to maintain your composure in a world that persistently attempts to disrupt it." He began to pose another inquiry, but she raised her hand subtly. "That is all," she responded. "Have a good evening." She and Darius departed into the night, and the story, though no longer dominating news coverage, persisted. It resonated in discussions among friends, in classrooms, when instructors utilized it as a practical example. Reflecting on the events, many recalled the emotions they felt witnessing it, prompting introspection about their own responses, their own stillness, and their own sense of self-respect. Kyle Dunham appeared in court 3 days following his arrest. The court referenced his previous charges and imposed a 30-day detention while awaiting further investigation. Vanessa did not attend the court proceedings, stating that she had already expressed what she needed to. The legal center where she worked experienced an increase in support following the incident. Financial support arrived, and individuals registered to volunteer. A few referenced the video, but the majority expressed a desire to contribute to something impactful without needing fanfare. Vanessa Kirkland, in particular, continued her daily train journeys. That train, for better or worse, evolved into a visible representation of dignity and action. In a world often filled with distractions, individuals such as Vanessa Kirkland serve as a reminder of a truth that is often overlooked. True resilience isn't always loud. Occasionally, it remains still, speaks with composure, and stands firm. This isn't driven by a desire to triumph, but a determination to remain present. If this narrative resonated with you, prompted reflection, or evoked thoughts of someone familiar, please share it. Subscribe for further authentic stories similar to this one, highlighting how quiet strength can be more impactful than force and justice can manifest in unexpected ways. Remember, you never know who you might encounter on the train.